Awesome. So tell me a little bit about yourself and your organization and what you're passionate about.
Well, my history is I started off as an electronics engineer, then started my own company. Then I fell in love with software and my company turned into a software company. I developed an ERP, comprehensive ERP system for mid-sized companies. And that was quite successful, went from the garage to 400 people, did an IPO.
Nice.
So that was super exciting. Yeah, thank you. And so at that point, basically, I decided what project do I want to tackle, and what struck me is how dumb software is, and I was very proud of my own software.
It's very dumb. It's so dumb.
Right. So what could we do about it? So I took 5 years off to study intelligence, both artificial and natural intelligence, really, all different aspects of it: philosophy, epistemology, theory of knowledge. How do we know anything?
Wow.
How do children learn?
You.
Yeah, was passion, was really great exploring that and deeply understanding it. How do children learn? How does our intelligence differ from animals? And what do IQ tests measure? And of course, what work had already been done in the field of AI. And so that culminated, and then in me actually starting an AI company. And 2001, I actually wrote a book with several others, and 3 of us actually coined the term artificial general intelligence, or AGI, to really take AI back to its roots, to build thinking machines that can think and learn the way humans do. Whereas what really AI has been doing for the last 2 decades, probably 4 or 5 decades even, is narrow AI, because the original dream of building human-like intelligence obviously turned out to be really, really hard. So people then decided, well, we'll just solve one narrow problem at a time and call that AI. So I've had several companies then since 2001, and focusing alternately on R&D or development and on commercialization. And I love both the technical aspect. I still program pretty much every day, but also love the business side of things, interacting with customers and seeing out in the real, seeing our product in the real world and seeing the company prosper. So my current company is Aigo.ai, which I started about 7 years ago, but for the first 5 years, we were in just pure development mode, just to take the technology to the next level. And we started commercializing just over a year ago. And what our core product is a chatbot with a brain.
Nice.
So all the chatbots out
actually much better than any other chatbot I've seen so far, but go on.
Yeah, all the other chatbots out there don't have a brain. And that's a fact. They basically use machine learning to just get your intent, say blah, 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 something, and it triggers something. So you say, I hate Uber, don't ever give me Uber again, or trigger the Uber app, And then somebody writes a little flowchart program, where do you want to go? How many people are going? And do you want Uber X? So our approach is to start off with the cognitive engine, the brain, the intelligence that you really need, that can have much deeper understanding, that can use context, that has memory. It remembers short-term and long-term, as long-term and short-term memory, has some degree of reasoning. So that allows you to have a much more successful, meaningful conversation. So that's my passion, obviously.
I love it. So what was the breakthrough here? Like, what was holding us back from doing this earlier? Because people have been talking about AI for forever. And
right.
what is it that happened with you that made it different?
Yeah. So actually, it's a very interesting question, because of course the majority of people still believe that AGI is decades away, or maybe we'll never have human level intelligence. And of course, until we really get there, we don't know for sure. But in 2001, when we coined the term, several of us got together and we felt that hardware and software technology had progressed sufficiently over the decades that it was time for us to, have another go at it. And, in this 20 years that I've been working on this now, I still feel very, very confident that we can achieve human level intelligence pretty soon. And what has
Now,
changed?
some people will hear that and they'll be freaking out, and other
Yeah.
people will be going, "This is great."
Yeah, right. Well, I'm obviously one of those. This is great, and we can certainly talk about that.
I say the sooner the better, man. I mean,
Right.
sooner the better.
Right. So, so what has changed? It's, yes, hardware technology. I mean, when I started building machines, we had 32K of RAM, that we had to work with. And, they're literally a million times faster. So that makes a huge difference. If you want to run a little test that now takes 1 second to run, that would have taken, I don't know, can't do the calculation in my head, but that would have probably taken a few months, to run one little test that takes a second now. So, yes, the technology has changed substantially. But to me, there's a more fundamental breakthrough that hasn't happened yet, is when people in the AI field today still don't start off by saying, what is intelligence? And really understanding intelligence first, because if you don't understand the problem, you're not likely to come up with the right solution. So people just say, hey, we have a problem to solve. We want a chess playing computer. So they then use their own intelligence to figure out how they can write a program that can play chess well, whether that's through big data science, as what is fashionable now, or through logic systems by, fancy flowcharts and logic steps. So you really need to understand what intelligence is, what it entails, before you can build something. So in my mind, DARPA actually describes this as 3 waves of AI, which I find quite useful. They talk about the 3rd wave of AI. First wave was logic approaches, expert systems and that kind of thing. We are obviously in the middle of the 2nd wave, which is big data, machine learning, deep learning, which is extremely successful in areas where statistical approaches are meaningful. And of course, it's driven by the huge companies that have a lot of data, have a lot of computing power. So that's the hammer they've got, and everything looks like a nail.
And they make horsepower and data, right? That's horsepower and data. That's all it is.
Yeah, exactly. And they're making billions or trillions in advertising revenue, and it's very significantly improved speech recognition. It's very significantly improved image recognition. So obviously, it's very, very powerful technology, but it's not AI. It's not artificial general intelligence.
No.
So the 3rd wave is what the DARPA talk about. The 3rd wave is really what we call a cognitive architecture. It's where you start off by saying, what does intelligence require? And does your architecture inherently have the components required for intelligence? And the most obvious example here is memory, and being able to learn one shot in real time. Also to be able to reason. Now, deep learning, machine learning basically simply doesn't have those attributes. You collect a lot of data, you number crunch it, and you then create a model, but the model itself is essentially static. It's a read-only model. There's no real interactive learning happening. There's no reasoning. There's no deep understanding. So the architecture of deep learning doesn't really lend itself to that. So it's basically what has changed is, I think we have the advances in hardware and software, and coupled with understanding what intelligence and having the right approach, I think we can now implement the 3rd wave and build truly intelligent systems.
Well, it's interesting you should mention that. So it sounds like it's more of a top-down approach than a bottom-up approach, right? So that's one thing. And then when you mention memory and reason, it's like a memory, I can understand how we can give machines memory, but reason, how do we get them to reason? I mean, that seems a bit tough nut.
Well, they're obviously different. I mean, there's deduction, which has been around for a long time, that you can do deductive reasoning. So I don't know that anybody's really tried to implement. I mean, I'm sure somebody has somewhere tried to implement this in neural nets and deep learning, machine learning, but that's sort of really fallen by the wayside. Whereas you go back 20 years in AI, there was a lot of formal, of formal logic and reasoning happening. So how do you bring that reasoning back into a cognitive architecture? And so there's deduction, there's induction, you know, and using context. I mean, reasoning encompasses really a broad range of things. So yeah, that has to be part of the solution, is for the system to be able to, you know, do induction, deduction, and you know, disambiguation and things like that.
And is all this totally explainable, or is there some black box here that people don't get a chance to look at?
Yeah, no, that's a huge advantage with this approach. It's totally scrutable. Now, of course, it may get very, very complex. You know, it may, but yes, you can. It's fully explainable, unlike machine learning, deep learning, which isn't. So that's another huge advantage. So if our system doesn't produce the right results, we can go back and track exactly, okay, where, you know, where were the I mean, it's not a true logic system in that sense, or not a traditional logic system. It's more an evidence-based system. So our system gathers evidence, you know, for various hypotheses, and then one hypothesis will win. So you can say, well, why did the wrong hypothesis win? And then it might be because there was some background knowledge that was missing. There might be you know, some bias that's undesirable. There might be a bug in the program, whatever, but you can pinpoint it, you know, exactly.
So how does is this thing like ready to come out of the box? And then what do you do to get it ready once it's out of the box?
Right. So unfortunately, because, you know, we're still a long way from human level intelligence. And one of the big problems is just the common sense knowledge that we have as humans, you know, growing up in the real world as kids, and, you know, just interacting with the world every day. So that's very hard to get into the system. So it simply doesn't have that general knowledge. So that's the reason we currently don't, for example, try to give a general personal assistant like Siri or Alexa, because people could ask it anything, you know, and I mean, the amount of interfaces you'd need about, you know, current baseball scores and the weather and traffic conditions and whatnot is, you know, that by itself is obviously a huge thing. But even to have the background knowledge of, you know, what is common in different parts of the country, it will be different and so on. So what we do is we have a core of knowledge and ontology and reasoning ability. That's the core of our brain, and that is used for all of our applications. And of course, as time goes by, that core, you know, grows, and we teach it more and more. And that's basically the common information, the common knowledge required. So right now, that will be about people and places and relationships and things like that, and how to start a conversation, how to end a conversation. Then we work with large companies to deploy our Aigo we actually deploy it behind their firewall into their you know, technology stack, into their infrastructure, and we then add another layer of ontology which is specific to that company. So it's basically, you know, what are the products, the business rules, and so on that you're going to be dealing with. That's also where the APIs to their backend system will be involved. So that's the second layer. The third layer is for each individual person that interacts with the system, that you have their unique history or conversation history, and you can hyper personalize it to that person. So next time they interact with Aigo, it will have information from previous interactions. So that's basically how we work at the moment, is to, you know, to build these constrained domains. Basically, it's still a general architecture, but it's taught to do a particular job.
So it's taught the company's ontology as well as the task's ontology, because you were talking about, like, is it a subset of what it's trying to do? So I think you mentioned that the application was a flower company or something like that. So it would know, like,
yeah, that's for example. Yeah, so
okay.
For that, taking that as an example, if you know, selling gifts, it would remember what kind of gifts you like, or who who you buy them for, what your relationship is. You know, you bought something for your daughter and your daughter likes these chocolates, or you bought something for your grandmother, and when you bought it, and it might be for a birthday. So then a year later, it could remember, oh, you know, do you want to, you know, buy a birthday present again for your grandmother? And, you know, remember what the address is, and or you could say, no, they've moved, or you want to send it to their office instead of their home, you know, that kind of thing. So that's the ontology. We make sure that the system has that ontology, and then also hooking into the backend system, whatever information is on the corporate database, that can also be utilized in the, you know, in the process.
Right. But that generic brain basically can be plugged into any kind of processes. So if I wanted to bring it into this or that industry, it doesn't really matter.
Correct. Yeah. So we use the same brain, for example, in, you know, for insurance, for banking, for diabetes management, you know, with the second layer, then of course will be very different, because you will have the medical terms about diabetes, you know, different synonyms and implications. And then you might have a food database, you know, and then for the individual, you will learn, you know, do you like broccoli or do you hate broccoli? You know, so it can make recommendations and it'll remember that for you. But yes, the same core brain is basically, whether it's diabetes management or a retail assistant or a hotel concierge, or in the car as you're, you know, managing your infotainment system, and or for a sales assistant for a salesperson, all the same, using the same core brain.
Right. But you still have to feed it structured information, right? You can't just give it a whole bunch of unstructured information and have it deduce what to do with it.
Yes, that's correct. But it's as much a quality assurance issue as it is anything else, because to make sense of actually what is relevant, what isn't relevant, what is accurate, what isn't accurate. I mean, if you just let it go to Wikipedia or your corporate documents, Aigo could read that, but you know, it's like taking somebody off the street and letting them read your corporate documents. Are they likely to actually understand from that, you know, and come up with the right things? So no, it's curated information, basically. So while we can learn from, you know, natural language and unstructured text, typically you don't really want to do that. I mean, with, you know, the large customers that we're working with, in fact, they don't even want Aigo to generate too much of, have too much flexibility in generating output in natural language generation, because everything has to go past their marketing department and past their legal department, you know, so that what Aigo says is really quite constrained. So both on the input side of what you feed Aigo and what Aigo outputs, in practical applications, you actually, there's a lot of quality. There's a lot of human in the loop, basically.
Yeah.
But you do it once, you do it once, you know, you do it once and then it's there.
You almost want to create a legal Aigo where you can pass it by the legal Aigo and just have that like as a lawyer avatar for the organization, and just feed stuff through, make it go faster than
absolutely. I mean, that's one of the applications we, you know, you mentioned that we actually did exactly that, where we started reading through legal documents that as an assistant in a very large, one of the top law firms in the country. So they have, you know, hundreds of, so probably thousands of associates. And so when they get a contract with a very large client of theirs, like, you know, Apple or whatever, just the contract they have with that company could be 150 pages. You know, can we use interns for that? Can we charge for that? You know, where do we store our data and all of that? And that's all in that document. So we basically had Aigo read the document and build a knowledge graph of that, and you could then ask questions about it. And we did that as a sort of a development project, and we could do that. It's just the amount of human quality assurance that the answers are correct and that Aigo understood everything, that Aigo has enough background information, is quite expensive. So you have to have an application where, you know, there were basically much better projects with better ROI than that particular project.
So with that makes me think that there's those people who say, "Oh no, this is terrible." They're okay because we're not going to be unleashing AGIs all over the place anytime soon, right? There's still lots of limitations.
Correct.
It sounds like there's a financial limitation saying it's still cheaper to hire a lawyer than it is to bring Aigo in to be your lawyer. So are there other things that we can say to sort of placate those people who are freaking out about AI?
Well, I think it's a little disingenuous for me to say something like that, because while that is true today, I mean, right now yes, it's cheaper, but we're a tiny company. We're just starting out to really commercialize this in big scale, and these kind of legal applications are absolutely possible. The core Aigo needs to have a bigger ontology, that there's less you have to teach it. Our tools need to get better. We need to have more of an ecosystem of experts, different experts. I mean, for example, we weren't legal experts. If we had a team that both know Aigo technology and know the legal aspects of it, they could also would cost less. It would be faster for them to get Aigo to a place where it can do that. So that will happen. I don't really see the limitations of that. So I think one really has to. It's going to happen, basically. There's no doubt about it, and it's more a question of saying, is that a good or a bad thing, and what are the likely implications?
Well, I would say it's always a good thing. The question is when, right? It's always a question of when. When are these things going to happen? Because they all will eventually happen. We just have no idea exactly when they're going to happen. But it sounds like you have made some progression towards sort of like a true AGI that you can just sort of feed unstructured data to.
Yeah.
How far away would you say that is?
So I'll always answer that question that it's not a matter of time; it's a matter of dollars.
I mean, $1 billion away, $1 trillion away.
Yeah, less than $1 trillion in my mind, quite a lot less than $1 trillion. And I mean, the reason for that is, we've been working on it with a relatively small team. I've commercialized it, but up to now we haven't had that sort of people just throwing money at us, and that we can hire thousands and thousands of people to work on it. I mean, to put it into perspective, Amazon, I believe, have 10,000 people working on Alexa.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah,
and it's still terrible.
I know. So if you don't have the right approach, if you don't have the right architecture, then that is a problem. So clearly, more people have to work on the right approach to make that happen. And the more people work on it, the quicker it's going to happen. Now, it could happen in less than 10 years for sure, in my mind. But that depends on whether we stay stuck in the deep learning, machine learning groove. And at the moment, it looks like we are stuck in that groove. I mean, Microsoft still invested $1 billion last year in OpenAI and deep learning, machine learning. Google is still, funding DeepMind, 600 PhD level people, really deep learning, machine learning. So the people in charge, basically, their mindset is it's all about big data, it's machine learning, deep learning. And I don't, these big oil tankers aren't going to change direction very soon. And it's much worse than that, because just as an anecdote, we had a brilliant intern from Germany working for us, and he really got the AGI cognitive architecture thing, was really great. And then he went back to Germany to do his PhD. Now, he couldn't get a sponsor for anything cognitive architecture related, so he ended up doing his PhD in deep learning. And now another brilliant person who could work on this lost.
Jeez.
Lost to us.
So so problem. How do you convince people that this is the better approach?
Well, two ways, and they're converging. I just don't know how long it's going to take. So the one is more and more people are realizing what the limitations are of deep learning, machine learning, and in fact, even Demis Hassabis, the CEO of DeepMind, as long as 3 years ago already, he said, deep learning is definitely not going to get us to real AI. But they also don't have a plan B. There's so much momentum, and the people they've hired are all statistics experts and, deep learning, machine learning experts. So yes, it's a cultural problem. So in academia, you basically can't get traction there. You can't get any papers published. If it's not deep learning, machine learning, you can't get a sponsor. And then, of course, from an investment point of view, people will look at our approach and say, oh, this makes a lot of sense. But then, yeah, well, let me check with my AI expert. And of course, what is the AI expert? He's a deep learning, machine learning expert,
Exactly.
And, and then they'll come back with things, well, if your approach is so good, then why isn't Google, and, why aren't Google and Amazon and IBM and Microsoft doing it,
It's nuts. I mean, these people are supposed to be innovators, and they're supposed to be seeing, unearthing innovative thinking. And here's an innovation right in front of them, and they're still,
Yeah. So, so it's a convergence on the one hand, more and more people realizing what the limitations are. As powerful as machine learning is, it has clear limitations, and that's becoming more and more obvious. And then on the other hand, can we demonstrate, in practical terms, not just on sort of theoretical and toy problems, can we demonstrate that our technology really can solve problems well, and it's scalable and all of that. And, that's what we're in the process of doing now that we launched our commercialization.
So do you have a grand experiment that you're working on to present that, or is it just going to be these
it's incremental? I mean, we have a lot of during our development phase, we developed a lot of demos that show just how powerful the system is. And I mean, on our website, we have a comparison to Alexa, literally using Alexa and then using Alexa microphone and speaker, but hooked up to our brain. And it's, like day and night. But of course, that's not a full commercial system. People say, okay, can I try it? No, I mean, there's only a very small subset of the ontology that we were able to actually build, for that. But it's not hard coded. It's actually using our technology. It's not a scripted or mock-up demo. But still, to have that, it definitely still takes a leap of faith to go from a prototype that has limited functionality using our approach to really seeing it work, at scale in the wild. And that's what we're right now in the process with several large customers that we're implementing and going live with. So hopefully that'll help. But, in parallel, we continue improving the brain.
Well, it sounds to me that it's still not sort of self-propelled, right? You still have to do a lot of work to get to the point where it's actually usable. I mean, how far away are we from a point where you can actually just set it free and have it do its own thing, learn on its own?
Well, that's basically an AI complete problem, or an AGI complete problem.
Right.
Because it has to have human level intelligence basically to do that. Because as long as you need a human in the loop, I mean, you would need to basically have the AI then talk to the legal department and the marketing department and say, hey, here, this is what I'm proposing. Do you like it? And then would say no. And then Aigo would argue, like we now do, well, if you change the language to that, you're really crippling the functionality of the system. If you're going to insist on saying your business is important to us, please carefully listen to our menu options have changed, please carefully listen to, the 10 different options we have. If you really insist on putting that in, you're going to cripple it, so you'd have to have Aigo smart enough to have those kind of debates, or with the security system saying, no, they won't let Aigo have access to the internet. We don't do that, and say, well, if we don't have access to the internet, we can't do a Google search and give the customer answers from that, and then, so no, it's to truly get to a point where Aigo can install itself and learn by itself, is basically when I don't have a job anymore.
Well, I'm not trying to take you out of a job. I'm just saying that, like the holy grail.
So it's really, to be realistic about it, there is so much of negotiations that go on with clients to integrate the system into their stack of what features they want, what features they don't want, what their business rules are, what makes sense, what APIs are actually available, what APIs are coming, what functionality can you enable now. All of that, this is just part and parcel of the implementation. So, our approach to that is to improve the tools that we have to do that tremendously. And, we already, over the last few years, we've easily seen one order of magnitude an improvement, whereas something that might have taken, 3 weeks now takes 2 days. And we see there are lots of improvements that we can still think of that'll take it from, 2 days to a few hours and so on. And of course, as the library grows as well of ontologies, sub-ontologies, and APIs and applications and so on, obviously that it becomes easier and easier to do these things.
Are there any specific use cases or industries that are more well suited to using Aigo for?
Well, at the moment, because the implementations are non-trivial, it's really, there has to be a fairly high volume of similar kind of interaction, similar kind of support that you're providing, sales or support, or if it's diabetes management, or if it's a sales assistant, you have to have enough, salespeople or people with diabetes to do that. And then of course, quite naturally, it has to be something between what a simple chatbot can do. I mean, if you say, give me my account balance, okay, any chatbot can do that. So, but on the other hand, it can't be where you need a human to solve a problem, that requires a lot of judgment or empathy or hard selling or whatever.
When are you going to build the empathy chip into it? Come on. That's coming soon, right?
Yeah, well, can go horribly wrong, in terms of just how hard you want to push it, in terms of whether you've got the right cues and the right common sense to say, well, is this a tragedy or is it a comedy, or what is
that's going to be tough. I don't think AGI is anywhere near figuring that out yet.
No, but we're getting there. We do some of that, and it'll get better and better. But there are so many applications right now where people are trying to use chatbots, are trying to automate, either phone that really can be automated very successfully if you have some brain power there, if you have memory and reasoning and so on. So lots of applications, but my ultimate goal is to have your personal assistant, and we actually call that a personal assistant. And
so do you have that on your website now? I could try it out, like personal assistant?
No, again, as I mentioned, because of the broad range of knowledge of ontology that you would really expect for this to be useful is something we're a few years away from that. And doing these more constrained applications right now helps us to build up this repertoire of knowledge, and quite frankly, the dollars we need to grow our team to develop something. But the reason we call it a personal assistant is we think that's the next revolution that's coming, where the word personal, it should actually be personal assistant, is 3 important meanings. You want it personal, that it's yours, you own it. It serves your purpose, not some mega corporation's purpose. So it's your agenda. That's the first, personal. The second, it's hyper personalized to you. It's customized to you. It's not a one size fits all. It knows about you. It knows your history and so on. And then the third, personal, is the privacy issue. It's this personal thing, and you can decide what you want to share with whom. And I think, everybody would love to have this kind of personal assistant that they own and is hyper personalized, is intelligent. And I think people would be quite willing to pay for that. So right now you're selling your soul. You're getting it for free, but you're selling your soul. So if you had a personal assistant that you're not selling your soul, you own it, it serves your agenda. And, we'll get there. And they're in fact some of the commercial applications that we have right now are sort of a stepping stone in that direction, because if you have a diabetes management assistant, then, you know, you can slowly increase it and say, well, manage my calendar as well, you know, and reminders and do things. Or if you have a personal assistant at work to help you manage Salesforce, then again, it's a small step to manage some of your private affairs as well. You know, your calendar will then, okay, remind me to pick up the kids on the way home, you know, or can my wife also have an Aigo that, you know, my partner can have an Aigo so that we can coordinate our schedules and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, I was actually writing something like this years ago for the IFTF about how, if you think about where our virtual assistants are now, they're all beholden to major corporations, right? Amazon or Google or Apple, they have to know everything about us to be able to provide what they have. But so we don't have anybody on our side. There's no personal assistant who we own and fighting for us and is keeping our data safe, right? I want my assistant to negotiate with Google or Amazon's, you know, virtual assistant. I don't want to just, you know, give my data to it. Yeah,
that's exactly right. So, and it can then interface with different APIs and, you know, different assistants, but it serves your agenda, not some mega corporations. And right now, all of the assistants that you have, if you're using, you know, Google Assistant, but you're also using Alexa, these are all siloed, you know, and they don't talk to each other, which, I mean, you don't want them to talk to each other. But if you say, hey, I'm going on vacation next week, you know, ideally your partner's iPhone, your Google and your Amazon, like, should all know about it, you know, but the right way to do it.
And then my assistant, my personal, my P3 assistant should be able to give whatever information it needs to, but no more, right? Exactly. Unlike what we're seeing today.
Right.
But my sense is that we're not going to see this because there's no huge money in it. I mean, how are we going to fund something like this? How do we get?
There's huge money in it.
I mean, people, it's like,
would you be willing to pay $20 a month for that?
Oh, I would, absolutely. Okay, so set it up, man. I want it now.
All right, you've just answered your question. People will be very happy. I mean, you know, you're currently paying, you know, $100, $200 for your phone, you know, to pay.
Yeah, no, I guess my question is, what do we have to do to get from where we are now to the point where I can sign up on the Aigo website for my $20 P3 assistant, which will be able to do all this interfacing with all these other bots?
Fund our company.
That's the thing. How much do you need? I mean, I'll whip up a crowdsourcing thing. I mean, I think that there's a huge
100 million crowdsourcing.
Is that all?
Well, that would get us a long way. I mean, you know, we're currently 25 people. We probably will double, but you know, that's small. You know, not going to do it with 50 people.
That's the thing that I'm concerned about, is that, I mean, where is the funding going to come from? Because I know your regular individual on the street who's understands they don't want to be beholden to the major corporate. But on the other hand, it's like they're almost sitting there waiting for somebody to come in and put down a pile of cash for you guys to.
No, we'll do it, and we'll do that, and we'll raise that kind of money. I mean, we need to do the commercial. We need to focus on the commercial side first. You know, that's where obvious money is, and grow as a company. And you know, as soon as we're decacorn, you know, we'll just fund it ourselves.
Keep fighting for the little guy, man. That's exactly what I'm for. It's like we have to go up against these mega corps and build our own bots that are on our side. I am totally up to
absolutely. You know, but it's exactly the big companies aren't going to give us that. I mean, they're built on advertising. That's their model. Well, in Apple's case, it's their hardware, that their walled garden, you know, that you're locked into, but still, they're not going to open up their ecosystem. But like all major innovation, it's not the big companies that do it. You know, I mean, it's like, who would ever have thought that tiny little Amazon could possibly compete against Barnes and Noble? You know, or
exactly
little startup.
Do you remember that picture of Jeff Bezos at his desk with the little banner? I don't know if you've seen that. It's just so hokey. But that was 20 years ago, you know, and now look at where they are now. So it's insane.
Right. Yeah.
So speaking of 20 years ago, let's go into the future. It's 2031. Where will we be? I mean, is this going to actually be realized 10 years from now?
I believe so.
What you're talking about?
Yeah, I believe so. So conversational AI is actually relatively easy compared to, full robotics, having the sort of, your butler,
Oh
robot
yeah, yeah.
butler that can do everything, because robotics is hard, to have the sort of sense acuity and dexterity of humans, and the robustness and the common sense to not break things, big time. But it'll follow. It's the same technology that will follow. But improving conversational AI with the approach that we have with the cognitive architecture of the brain, yeah, we see a very clear path forward. And we've been improving the brain now. The first generation I commercialized in the call center space with voice in 2008. And we've just launched the second generation. The difference this time is we are going to be developing the third, fourth, fifth generation and so on as part of our development, of part of our commercialization. Whereas in the previous commercialization effort, we were sort of stuck in the first generation, and all of our energy went into, we had a SaaS service and hosted our own data, created our own data center. So all of our energy went into HIPAA compliance and scalability, redundancy, security, and things like that. So we structure the company differently, and investors we have is that we can, very aggressively continue to crank up the IQ while we're commercializing.
Yeah, it's interesting you should mention that robotics piece, because I think you're 100% right. It's like there's certain tasks that humans can do really well, and certain tasks that machines can do really well. And we're going to get to this point where we'll have an economy where there's some kind of dispatching layer, which will go, okay, human, do this, okay, machine, do that, and then that's how we'll get paid, because we'll be walking down the street and there's a task a human will have to do, and I'll be told, hey, do this task and earn X amount of money. I mean, do you see that as a possibly coming out of this?
Yes, I mean, often people talk about, that sort of highly intelligent jobs will be the kind of the first to go,
Right.
sorry, the last to go, that the sort of lower intellectual jobs will be automated first. But no, it's the opposite. It's electricians and plumbers that'll be the last ones to be replaced, because of the dexterity, sense acuity, common sense, knowledge that you need to have. But yes, the switching between what robots can do and what a human can do, we're already seeing this in contact centers now, where you can sort of have a tango between, okay, Aigo will handle this. Now there's something that requires some judgment, or needs to be taken up with, discussed with the supervisor, so hand it over to a human. They get that sorted out, or answer that question, and then come back to Aigo to basically, take the payment or complete the transaction, or whatever it might be. And so, yeah, I see a lot more of that sort of interaction happening.
And this is seamless to the customer, so they have no idea that it's bouncing back and forth?
Well, actually, they should have an idea, according to my ethics. And it's one of the things we often debate with customers. Often customers say, I want your bot to sound just like a human. I want it to fake human things, that the customer thinks they're talking to a human. I think that's wrong. I don't like that.
Yeah.
I think the customer should know when they're talking to a bot and when they're talking to a human. And, so that's one of the debates we have.
But then you might end up passing somebody back and forth between bot and human, right?
Yeah, but people just want to get stuff done. That sort of often the marketing department has this idea, that you have to have this uniform experience and the customer shouldn't know, or whatever. But they know. I mean, the interaction is not the same. You start talking about you want to start talking about your grandkids and, whatever. Do you really want to train your bot to then, tell the person that they also love their grandchildren? Aigo also loves his grandchildren. Or
I almost think that there's an ulterior motive there to, let's see if we can eliminate the human completely, right? Is there a way to eliminate the human completely? And I don't think we should obviously not do that. It's more of a centaur approach, where the human and the AI working together to help the customer complete the task. I mean, that's exactly where it should go.
Yeah. But typically when people are calling into a company to get something done, they really just want to get it done. I mean, there are exceptions. There are people who are lonely and they just want to talk to somebody, but then the people in the call center aren't paid to just talk to somebody.
Yeah, and they're going, how am I going to get this person off the phone?
Yeah. Well, actually, there's a very, very sad story I can tell that in my first commercial AI company, one of the applications was that we actually automated taking orders for inmates in prisons.
Mm.
And when they were allowed to go to a telephone, they would call into Aigo repeatedly just to be able to have a conversation with a bot,
Wow.
Quite sad. So yeah, I mean, that's also when, as we progress, having Aigo as a psychologist, and ultimately your personal assistant is your angel on your shoulder, that can tell you, hey, well, wait, just maybe you want to sleep on this, before you whatever, before you put all your money into Bitcoin or
exactly,
or pull it out of Bitcoin.
Tell me, it looks like you're walking into Starbucks. You said you weren't going to buy Starbucks anymore. Turn around. Stop doing that.
Right. So, we'll get there as well, where I think it'll actually tremendously improve the human condition by us having a hyper-personalized, hyper-intelligent assistant, advisor, helper, that all 7 billion people can hopefully have.
No, I'd love to have that, as long as I'm the one telling it what I should be doing, as opposed to Google or Apple or Facebook.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, one of our corporate absolutes is we will not sell, we will not get into advertising and sell data, and that will not be our revenue model. It's just, we won't do it,
But it's okay if my wife programs it, though. That's okay.
She programs your Aigo.
Yeah, it's okay. I'll let her program my Aigo, so it's okay.
Well, that's, as long as you give her permission, you can do that. Yeah.
Right. Sounds good. All right, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much. So, if somebody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
Our website, Aigo.ai, AIGO.ai, and there are links to a couple of videos and actually quite a few articles. In fact, most of my articles are on medium.com. You can find them there, but they're also linked from our website, and can easily get a hold of me. I'm, on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn, or just Peter@Aigo.ai.
Fantastic. Well, I'll definitely look forward to that, and I definitely want to sign up for the P3 as soon as it's available. If I can help you in any way, I will. So I will look into that.
Awesome. Okay, great.
Thank you so much. It was great talking with you.
Right.
Talk to you soon.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.